Madam President, I want to thank my colleagues, Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island, Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, Senator Gillibrand of New York for joining us on the floor this morning to talk about the student debt crisis and college affordability. I don't think this is just another issue. I think this is a defining issue. Imagine, if you will, what has happened to America since we've called into question the intrinsic value of owning a home. That used to be built into our culture. The notion that if you could get beyond the rental stage and actually buy a home, it was a smart investment, number one, and a good investment in terms of your neighborhood, your community, your state. Well, the mortgage crisis that we went through was a shock to many people. They paid too much for their homes. They found themselves facing foreclosure and short sales. And the basic premise has been challenged. There's more rental property now. People are hedging their bets on the issue of home ownership. Now take one of the other pillars of our basic American values, and that pillar is you'll never go wrong with more education. I learned that at an early age, and luckily my mom and dad, with limited education experience on their own part, pushed me forward into college, into law school to finish, with the belief that at the end of the day I would be better off. And of course, statistics bear that out. But now comes this new challenge. The increasing cost of higher education drives many families deeply in debt, many students deeply in debt, to the point where many times it's impossible for them to pay back their debts. As Senator Reed says, it's transformative. You'll have young people who literally have their lives dramatically changed because of debt. And it's called into question. The basic premise is a higher education worth the money. I didn't think I'd ever see that as a legitimate topic for debate in America, but it turned out to be a cover on Time magazine. So it's not just a matter of the pundits and politicians talking about it. Average people, working families are talking about it. That's why we're coming to the floor here. And we hope to expand our numbers more and more, and I hope some of our Republicans will join in this conversation about what to do when it comes to student debt and the crisis it's creating. Millions of Americans pursue a college education, hoping that they'll realize the American dream. But as college tuition, textbooks, and fees skyrocket, students are paying more and more for education and taking on greater debt to pay for it. 68% of the class of 2012 graduated with some debt, an average of about $27,850 a year. The average debt was close to $40,000 for those students who attended for-profit schools, which deserve a special part of this conversation when we talk about the cost of higher education. Americans now collectively hold more than $1.2 trillion in student debt, more than Americans hold in credit card debt. This has surpassed credit card debt in America. It goes way beyond higher education. It goes into a question about personal credit, chances for mobility, and the future of students who sign up for these bone-crushing debt loads. In his recent State of the Union address, President Obama said he wants to work with Congress to see how we can help Americans who feel trapped by this crushing debt. Well, Mr. President, several of us are stepping up and accepting your challenge. I hope more members will as well. Late last year, Senators Reed, Warren, myself, Senator Barbara Boxer of California introduced the Student Loan Borrowers' Bill of Rights to spell out in basic terms the rights of student borrowers and their families in interacting with federal and private lenders, loan servicers, and schools. It's amazing to me that when it comes to mortgage debt, there are laws dictating what you need to be told. When it comes to student debt, not nearly the protections. And younger people who are making these life-changing decisions about debt deserve to know everything that they face and what they're getting into. I met a young woman in Chicago recently. Her name's Hannah Moore. She thought she did the right thing. She started off her higher education by going to community college. She was told that's affordable, close to home, do that first. She did it, and then she made a fatal error. After 2 years at a community college, she enrolled at the Harrington College of Design in Chicago. If you'll go to their website, you will be dazzled with the beauty of this school and the faculty and all the opportunities. Hannah Moore was dazzled. But this for-profit school ended up becoming a debt pit for her life. After she had exhausted all her federal loans and started taking out private loans at the Harrington College of Design, she graduated with a debt of $124,000, and she couldn't find a job. At one point, she was working 3 part-time jobs to pay $800 a month on this debt from this for-profit school. Her federal loan payments are manageable because the federal program at least allows her to make payments based on income, but the private loans that this school lured her into, thanks to interest and fees, now amount to $110,000. Her servicer on these loans refuses to work with her to find repayment alternatives. She sinks deeper and deeper every day into debt. This poor young woman thought she was doing the right thing going to school. Today, she's so deeply in debt, she can't even dream of buying a house, a car. Her father had to come out of retirement to help her pay off the loans at this for-profit school, the Harrington College of Design. Unfortunately, she wasn't protected with the Bill of Rights, which I've introduced and is being co-sponsored by my colleagues who've spoken today, which would have told her, don't apply for a private loan until you've exhausted your government loans. They are lower interest rate, more manageable, loans that can be consolidated, even in some cases forgiven, depending on the jobs that you take. No, she wasn't told that. She was lured into this debt trap by a school that just wanted to rake in the federal dollars at her expense. This is going to standardize policies, like how payments are applied to principal and interest, so that borrowers benefit instead of banks. Under the current situation, many students paying back their loans find that the money is going to the higher interest loans and not to the lower interest loans. It's not being transferred to their benefit. The bill requires services to have a service member and veterans liaison. Veterans are often victims of these notorious for-profit schools and other lenders. We also require students to be told of all their options, including federal loans, with better terms and repayments. Students often have no other choice but to take out loans to pay for college education, but this bill says borrowing money for college doesn't mean you give up your power over your money and your debt. I also want to tell you something that most people don't know. In bankruptcy court in America today, there are only a handful of debts that cannot be discharged in bankruptcy court: taxes and government payments, child support, alimony, and government student loans. A few years ago, the for-profit industry and the private loan industry engineered into these bankruptcy discharge laws a protection for their own debt. What does it mean? It means if you go to a for-profit school and take out a private loan, you are literally burdened with that for a lifetime. The grounds for discharging a student loan debt are some of the strictest and toughest in America. So students who sign up for this debt ought to know they're in it until it's paid, and that can mean for a lifetime. The Wall Street Journal reported some time ago of a grandmother co-signing a student loan for her granddaughter. The granddaughter defaulted, and they decided to levy on the grandmother's Social Security payments. That's how outrageous this has become. And sadly, these students don't realize when they're signing on the dotted line at age 19, 20, and 21, they're signing up for a debt that can trail them for a lifetime. That's got to change. We have got to follow Senator Reid's lead. Senator Jack Reid has said these colleges have to have some skin in the game. If they're going to lure students into student loans well beyond their ability to repay, let that college and university bear some of the responsibility for repayment too. I think that's only reasonable. So I want to thank my colleagues for bringing this issue up. I want to thank Senator Warren. Her partnership in this effort is especially important because of her background in law and finance. She can be an important part of this conversation. We're not going to end with this speech on the floor today by each of us. We're going to continue once a week to bring together those in our caucus, and I hope in the Republican caucus, who believe we have to address the student debt crisis and come up with a reasonable way for students to pay for an education that is reasonably priced. To have these students burdened with the student loan debtor prison is unacceptable in America today. It is time for us as a Congress to address this issue, and I yield the floor.